Hello, PLO Order. Welcome to the new episode. This time, the topic is notes. How to make notes and how to use those notes. Let's get started. First question would be, why notes? Why should we make notes on the table? The thing is that we should have a standard strategy that we follow versus unknown players. And to deviate from that standard strategy, we need a reason. And to have a reason, we need information. And to get information, there's multiple ways, but to have that information for later usage, we don't have to rely on our memories, we can make notes. So we type down the information we get so we can use that information later too, which is the reason for making notes. Notes gives information, and information leads to reasoning. Reasoning leads to adjustment. Adjustment leads to exploitation. And when making notes, it has a huge invest versus profit ratio. And in poker, it's always about investment compared to possible profits. And if the numbers favor us, it's plus EV. If the numbers don't favor us, it's minus EV. And with notes, it's hard to see a situation where making notes would be minus EV if you know how to use them. It could be minus EV if you make bad notes and give too much weight on that information. We will talk about that later, but normally making notes is plus EV. And in poker, we want to make plus EV decisions, so there's no reason why we shouldn't make notes. The thing is that a lot of people don't make notes because they are lazy ass bummers. But that's their loss. Think about this. To make a note, you spend 5 seconds. And in the worst case scenario, you never use the note, so you wasted 5 seconds of your life. In the best case scenario, you make a shitloads of money. So investing 5 seconds of your time, you might be able to win hundreds of dollars. Sounds pretty good to me. So, when making notes, we need some kind of system. Not just randomly typing everything we see, because you have to remember that in poker there's so much information available that it's hard to filter what's relevant. So if we just type down everything we see and the note box is like 300 pages long book, then it's really hard to find anything usable there. So we want to have useful notes. Notes that can be used are worth money. Notes that are useless, we don't need. It's just a distraction. We spend time reading them and there's no way we can use them. So the notes has to be easily used and usable. And now the thing is, everyone thinks differently. The way I think poker strategy is different than how you think poker strategy and how the third person thinks about poker strategy. We have different ways to get the same conclusions. And the important thing is that you make notes that are useful for you. And only you. No one else uses your notes. It's like if someone gets access to my computer and plays the games with my notes, then most likely he is not able to use all of those notes because he might not understand what they mean, and third, he might not have the skills to use that specific information. Or if I see someone else's notes, not sure if I can use that information to change my decisions and adjust my strategy. So, the thing is that you can make notes from different kinds of situations. That matters. It's like you make a note out of situation where you can use the information. But if you make note from wrong situations, then it doesn't help you. Like if you type down what's opponent river raising range, but you have no idea how to use that information, the situation is not useful for you. And another important thing, how useful the note is the language. If you write down a note and then next month you don't even understand what it means, it's not that useful. It's useless. So use a language you understand. You don't have to write perfect language. You just have to write down on a language you understand. You can have abbreviations, you can have all kinds of codes, you can have all kinds of shortening numbers, letters, whatever works for you. You can create your own language for the notes. But the most important question you always have to ask yourself and understand to ask yourself is, how can I use this note to make money? No matter how you mark your opponent, or no matter what note you take, or whatever stat you have on the hand, any information that you decide to put out there voluntarily, making notes, using HUDs, selecting stats, everything. The question you need to ask yourself is, how can I use this to make money? And if you don't know the answer, then don't do it. Then it's wasted information, it's misinformation to you on the table. So if you write down that, okay, opponent 3-bets 10-9-8, then ask yourself, what do I do with that information? What do I do with the information of opponent 3-bet range? And if you have no idea, I know he 3-bets wide, I have no idea how to adjust to that, then the information is useless. You don't need that information then. So you have to be able to answer, how can I use this note to make money versus my opponent? The language we use, only you have to understand your notes. So you are not writing notes for anyone else. So it doesn't matter if anyone else understands you or not. And then, some people like very detailed notes. It's very precise what happened with all the details. And then some players like very broad notes, very overall notes. And both of them are the correct way. And both of them are the wrong way. Because if you use very detailed notes, but while playing you just can't read that detail, you cannot process the detailed information, then that's a wrong note for you. Or if you make very broad notes, but you don't know how to use the broad information, you need detailed information, then it's a wrong note for you. So you have to think, what's best for me? Example, detailed note. On king 8 deuce, single suited, 2 turn, so the turn is a deuce. Opponent stabs 75% of the pot with flush blocker and barrel 7 river when hero is capped. And we could go even more detailed, hero is capped on the flop and turn, blah blah blah. Flush blocker with certain types of hands and so on and so on. So very detailed explanation, what happened, what's the table, what's the turn, what's the sizing, was hero capped or not, it's relevant information. Very detailed note about the situation. But now it's a lot of words, it's like 15 words with numbers. So if you're multi-tabling, when you just read it quickly and see, can you process the information? And understand, how do I use this information? What does this detailed action mean? And how do I use that information? So, same situation, but another player might write a note that stabs and barrels on good run out when hero is capped. Same situation, same kind of information, not so detailed. And then third player might just write down that he's a bluffer. And all of these notes are good. All of them are usable. All of them tells you how you might adjust versus that player. And all of them are right. It's just for different persons, everyone is different. If you can process the information on the first example, great. If you just can't, it goes over your head when you're playing, then maybe just writing down bluffer is easier to understand. And you can use that one. So, just like with the heart, there's no right, there's no wrong way. As long as it suits you, it's good. So find your own language and use it. That's the thing. On king 8-2 single suited 2 turn, you could find your own way to type down the same information. And the important thing is that nodes are consistent. They should be consistent. So if you use different language on different nodes, and then you have very detailed nodes, very broad ones, something in between, sometimes you type down the opponent's hand, sometimes you don't, then you have all kinds of mixed information. And it's always harder to process different types of information. But if all the information is on the same format, it's a lot easier. It's like if you're gathering information and some of them are in English, some of them are in Swedish, some of them are in Romanian, some of them are in some kind of Egyptian hieroglyphs, some of the information is on video format, it's hard to process because everything is different. But if everything is on the same format, same language, it's easier to use and compare and find what information correlates with each other. So when you find the language, when you find the system, be consistent and use that one. Then let's talk about the reliability of the nodes. It would be a perfect world if all the opponents were robots who never changed their strategy. Then we just find a way to exploit them and print money. One hand is a sample size of 1. So that sounds simple. What it means that if we see that opponent bluffs the river and make a note, it doesn't mean he always bluffs the river. It means that on one hand, he did bluff the river. There is a chance that it's a tendency. But there's also a chance that he just did it once. Maybe he misclicked. Maybe he had a brain fart. Maybe he tilted. Or then it is a tendency. Or who knows? He misread his hand. Who knows? So always remember that one note is a sample size of one hand. Everyone can evolve. It's just some players are more probable to evolve than others. But everyone can evolve. Someone can be the worst player on the pool for 5 years, and then he decides that, damn, I'm going to buy a course, I'm going to watch videos, and he becomes a good player. And everyone thinks he's the bad player, and he prints money. Another important thing to remember is no one plays 8 game all the time. And the smaller the stakes are, the more variance there is in the level of performance. People are tilting more. People are playing drunk, tired. They might do stupid things, brain farts more and more often. So if you see a note that someone makes a really aggressive play, it's a sample size of 1, it might be that he was tilted, and 90% of times he plays differently. So pay attention. And notes are never 100% truth. Well, actually they are the truth on that situation, but if you type down that someone likes to bluff rivers, we don't know if it's 100% truth. We know that for one hand, he decided to bluff the river. So you always have to weight the information and don't make big decisions based on the notes. Like you have a situation where all the other information dictates that opponent is value betting river. And then you have one note that once he decided to bluff me. Don't make a huge bluff catch if small information says he might be bluffing, but huge information quantity says that he's value betting. So don't give too much value for the notes. But then if we have a really tough decision that, damn, should I call or not on the river? Really tight. And then we have a note that, okay, likes to bluff rivers. That turns the scales. We decide to bluff catch. If we have a note that doesn't bluff rivers, it's shifted. We don't call. One way to give a marking of how often the thing has happened is you can use exclamation marks or you can use question marks. And they mean that when we see something happening once, we might put certain amount of question marks after the node, it means it's unreliable, happened once. When we see the same thing happen in second time, we remove one of the question marks. And when it happens a third time, we remove one of the question marks and put an exclamation mark. So you know that if, like, bluffs the river when turn goes check, check, and you put 3 question marks, you know that, okay, it happens once, but then later you can see that, okay, there's 2 exclamation marks after that, so it has happened 5 or 6 times, so it's a way more reliable node. So you can use that kind of system if you choose to. Then I said before that everyone can evolve, but some players evolve more. The Rex, tight aggressive players, those are the ones who evolve the most, because often they are the ones who have studied PLO. That's why they are playing tight aggressive with certain preflop stats. They are members of poker sites, they are watching videos, trying to become better, at least. They dream of becoming better. Often those are the players who might evolve a lot. So versus those players, pay attention to the old nodes. You might want to put date on the nodes. But at least pay attention when you play and you see that, okay, I have a node on this player, see the node, pay attention, does he do that still when he's playing? Because sometimes he used to bluff rivers too much, but then he figured out that it's bad strategy. Someone told him, he watched the videos, he stopped doing that. And you have the own node bluff rivers and you just think he's bluffing, and every time when he bets the river you call and you think, oh boy, I'm unlucky, he always has it. And you don't see that on the past 15 rivers when you called, he always has a value bet. You just trusted the old node that once, half a year ago, he bluffed the river, and now you just paid him 15 times in a row. So it's a weighting of the information and understanding how reliable the information is. Another way to mark and make notes is color coding. We should use color coding to identify certain types of players. So instead of writing a note, we can give a color to opponent, we know what kind of player he is. And the way I use is we have these 4 stereotypes of player that we have thought in the past videos of how to exploit certain types of players. So we have tight passive, tight aggressive, loose passive, and loose aggressive players. So we can use the color coding to mark those 4 stereotypes. Don't make it too complicated. I've seen color coding schemes where there's like 15 different colors. It's like 15 shades of colors. And there's like 5 different types of green for different types of high VPIP players. And when it gets too complicated, it's hard to use that information. And where do we draw the line? The more different player types we have, the harder it is to identify where the threshold is between those 2 players. And then we suddenly might be in a situation that we have 3 possible colors for the player and we don't know which one to choose. Of course, you can have complicated system if it works, but once you can ask yourself, how do I use this information? If you know the answer, go for it. I like to keep things simple. So what is useful and what is not? Is it useful to have 15 different colors? Do I actually use the information, or am I just cheating myself? How can I use the information? Should be the bottom line all the time. Here's my color coding that I use. Red is a tight player, so anyone with low VPIP, low aggression. So pretty much tight passive players. Then green is often used with call happy player, and I also use green versus any player that has high VPIP and I have edge against. So sometimes the opponent might have preflop stats of 25-25. So he's a solid red preflop, but then postflop he calls way too wide. Makes hero calls way too often. Then I mark him as a green, so I know that he likes to call a bit too much. So green is overall for call heavy players. He might be a red, he might be high VPIP player. So that's my green. I just know that if there's green on the table, it's profitable table for me. Then yellow is for aggressive player. I mean, I could have a different shade of green for call heavy red. I've been thinking about that, but just having a green has worked really well. I can see from the stats right away if he's a red or not, or from the name. So yellow is aggressive player, might be just complete maniac, might be a red who's too aggressive. In my opinion, he is unbalanced, bluffs too much. So when I have yellow coding on the player, I know that he's capable of making bluffs. Brown or orange, depending on the software, is just a good red. I don't mark all the reds. I often mark reds who I think I don't have edge enough to beat the red. So I know that the brown ones are kind of stay away. Don't get in the red battle. I don't mind playing with them, but I'm not constantly looking to play bots with them. So they are kind of meaningless players. So red and brown, not profitable. Green and yellow, those I want to see on the table. Then I have a blue, which I use to mark for later use. Like I see a hand where I want to make a note on the player, but he's not on the table. Like on the Zoom pool, I watch on the replayer that I want to make a note on that player. I might mark him as a blue, so I know when the blue comes to the table, that's the player I'm looking for. Or I want to pay attention to the player. I mark him as a blue. For whatever reason, blue is someone I'm trying to find on the tables. And then I have purple for friends and someone I know. Often the reason is it's fun to play with friends. It's nice to see them on the table. And then often they know who I am, which creates interesting dynamics. But yeah, purple is for friends. So there's 4 colors for player types and then couple for other purposes. That's my system. You don't have to copy it. Some people have different colors like red for call happy players and so on. I'm just showing an example of my color coding. Very simple. And the thing is, when you have just the solid colors instead of 15 shades of green, then no matter where you play, often these are the possibilities. On some sites you have only these colors. Some sites you have thousands of colors to pick from, but on most sides you have red, green, yellow, and brown or orange. So it doesn't matter where you play, you can use the same system. So now we have notes, now we have color coding, we might even have the HUD, so we have all kinds of information. Little pieces of information scattered all around the place. Same thing with HUD, we use them to make a player profile. And that's how I approach. Someone might do differently, but I found out that instead of just using one piece of information and trying to use that to exploit opponent, it's way more beneficial to gather all the pieces, put them together, and find what do we know about the opponent. Because in the end, human is a logical creature. Everything we do for a reason. Sometimes we just don't know the reason. That's the psychology. But we don't do randomly. We do things for a reason. And we have some kind of logic. Sometimes the logic is very flawed. Sometimes it's very bad. Sometimes we don't even know it, but we always have a reason. Like when passive calling station decides to call with the cut shot, it's just a random, it's never a random action. He always thinks that, what do I have? And do I have a feeling I'm going to hit it? And then if his feeling says yes, or he hopes to hit it, he calls, but he had a reason. And we see that as a really bad reason because the odds are not there, but he's not thinking about probabilities. And now when we make a player profile, if you can figure out how the opponent thinks about poker, what drives his logic, what is his logic, why he makes decisions, how he plays, then you can really start to exploit it. It's like the old school poker. You get into the other people's and players' heads. It's not soul reading. We're not crushing his soul. We just understand how he thinks. Because often people have similar strategy. It's not like on Mondays he's call passive and on Tuesday he's maniac and on Wednesday he's playing perfect solver strategy. It's never that case. He might be sometimes drunk and playing differently, but normally passive calling stations are passive calling stations most of the time. So just figure out how he plays. And when we have the general understanding how the opponent approaches poker overall, that's when we can start to really exploit, and that's how we start to make money. And we have information on the tendencies we can exploit. And once again, the question, how do I use this information? We have the player profile, we know how he thinks. The next question, how do we use this information to exploit him? How do we exploit his tendency? There it is, sorry. And nothing is 100% sure. No matter how good player profile you have, sometimes they might miss it. The tightest player might decide that, damn, I'm going to bluff. He gathers all the strength in himself, throws some pairs of balls, and makes a river bluff, which he has never done in his life. So nothing is 100% sure. You have to weight the information. Just like everything in poker, it's the game of imperfect information. So you have to gather information and weight what is relevant, how probable. So once again, don't make huge adjustments, but on tight spots, all extra information might weight the scales to some direction. So what should we make notes of? Now we talk about the system, how to make notes, what kind of language, system, codes, whatever. But do we write everything we see? My advice is no. Try to keep it useful. If you write everything, then there's a lot of useless information. The way I make notes is every time player does something that doesn't fit his player profile, then it's something that I didn't expect. Like if the player profile is passive calling station and he decides to bluff the river, it doesn't fit the player profile, make a note out of that. Or a situation that can be instantly exploited. Like when flush completes and we bet opponent snap calls with the straight, so doesn't believe the flush. Or opponent raises flop with the set, we call, turn completes the flush, we bet turn, we bet river, he calls with the set, turn and river, so doesn't follow the set even when flush completes. We can instantly exploit that information. We know that we have more implied odds, we know we can value bet rivers more easily. So every time there's a situation that can be instantly exploited, it's definitely worth making notes. Or notes of information that can be. Who changed the letters? Well, notes of information that can be easily used. So once again, what is useful? How can I use this information? So it's pretty much the previous thing, but something that when you think about, okay, should I note that down? Think, how can I use the information? If you cannot figure out how to use the information, well, you can make the note, but probably it's not worth it if you have no idea how to use it. So examples of situations or things that I like to make notes. 3-betting, 4-betting range. And this is where Poker Tracker 4 is handy because there's no tracker extension that you can set it to make automatic notes. So every time when opponent 3-bets or 4-bets and the hand goes to showdown, it marks down the pre-flop hand. So then when you gather information, you can easily see that what hands he has 3-bet or 4-bet, so you can make assumptions of his range. Because sometimes a lot of people have 5% 3-betting range, but the content of that 5% is way different. Someone has aces and kings, and that's 5%. I've seen people who don't ever 3-bet aces. They 3-bet ace-high rundowns and only call with aces, and they have 5% 3-bet range. Some guys have mostly aces and then some super weird middle rundown, and so on. So same frequency, different content. So making notes of 3-bet, 4-bet hands is often very useful to figure out how ace is heavy his range is. Calling ranges, whether it's flop, turn, river, I like to make like how wide he is calling c-bets on the flop, how wide he is calling turns, and on the river, how wide is his calling range. Because those are information we can easily adjust. If we know that the opponent calls the flop with almost anything, then we can start to value bet more, bluff a little less, or if he folds a lot on the turn, we can bluff flops and just barrel out of turns. And on the river, if we know how wide he is calling, it's like a previous video exploiting calling stations. Make notes how wide he calls on the river, because then you can figure out how wide you can value bet. Then locked boards are kind of situation where, especially versus regulars, things get really interesting because everyone is trying to adjust to everyone and figuring out how to exploit each other. So I'm making notes like how opponent plays monotone paired boards, especially if that strategy changes from the standard strategy I would expect them to play. Like how wide they're calling on the locked boards. Are they often raising and raise folding, so they're bluffing on locked boards and so on. And then, of course, bluffing tendencies. If opponent bluffs flop, turn, and river, hand goes to showdown, I can see it. I try to figure out what was the situation. Did he bluff when I was capped? Did he bluff when I was not capped? Was it a good spot to bluff, bad spot to bluff? So I get this general idea of, does he make bluffs for certain reasons, or is he just a random bluffer who bluffs every time when shown weakness, or whatever the reason is? Because that information I can use easily. All right, then in the end, few useful tips. When you're multi-tabling, then often on the sides of the problem is that when you have action on the table, that table is selected. So if you were typing notes on the different table, it jumps to another table, and it's hard to write the notes because every time when you try to write something, the attention is on the other table, and the other table is active. So if you have this problem, open a notepad where you can write the notes on the notepad first, and then just copy paste them. That's definitely an option. Or if you're multi-tabling, and sometimes when you play on pretty much the maximum of your tables, so you don't have a time to make notes, then open your mobile phone or computer audio and just voice record. Player, the note, and then when you have a break, you can write it down on notepad and copy paste to the player. That easy. So definitely an option. And don't worry about the typos. You would be amazed how many typos I have on my notes, but it doesn't matter as soon as I understand what it means. So it doesn't have to be perfect English or any other language. As soon as you understand what you wrote. If you don't understand what you wrote, then you have a problem. And what happened? There it is. The thing is that when you become a better player, your notes should change. Opponents evolve and we evolve. And the information we can use to adjust changes when we get better. It's like when we start poker, if we see a note that, okay, opponent always bluffs when we are capped, but we have no idea how to exploit that information, it's useless. Then later, we know how to use that information. So, when you become better and you get better understanding of the poker, better understanding of the situation, the ranges, and so on, then your notes should evolve. So don't think that you have to select one way to make notes and use that for the rest of your life. That always try to find ways to exploit opponents. Always try to find information and think, can I exploit this information? Because often what happens is players they are lazy as bummers and they are happy where they are. So they open the software, they just play and grind on very same level. They don't challenge themselves. And then they don't get better. But if you're constantly watching the tables, like sometimes if you're normally multi-tabling, then sometimes you might open fewer tables and pay more attention what happens. If you're not in the hand, try to see what opponent does. Hand goes to showdown. Open the replayer, check the hand, and why did he play this hand this way? And wow, he decided to do this with this exact hand combination. That's weird. Wouldn't expect that. Is there something that I can make a note and exploit on him? And so on. So try to find those notes. Because the thing is that the tougher the competition is, the harder it is to gain edge. And to make money, we need to have edge or bigger than the rate is. And with nodes, you can quite easily increase your edge a little, at least a little. Sometimes you can increase it a lot. And if you're constantly looking nodes and reasoning and ways to exploit opponent, you start to see the information and your poker understanding evolves. You get better player even when you don't make the notes, but just trying to find notes makes you a better player. So if you are not making notes, then my question to you is, why not? And the only reason is because you are a lazy ass bummer. If you're not making notes, that's the only reason. There's no other reason why we shouldn't make notes. So the question is, why you are a lazy ass bummer? And well, humans are. I am, you are. I don't always make notes. No one does. But if we want to become good players, we have to get over of being lazy as bummers and start to do work. So if you're not making notes, I challenge you on your next session, make at least one note and get started. If you're making notes, fine. But as you watch these videos, I hope you pick up a few things to increase the quality of your notes. All right? Wow. 37 minutes of taking notes. I thought this would be quite a quick video, but in the end, a lot of good stuff. Hope you enjoyed. I will see you on the next video of the PLO Order. Stay safe in the galaxy. Bye-bye.